Next, we have some presentations, and I'd love to hear about social studies. So Dr. Boley, enlighten us.
Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of being here this evening with the two outstanding leaders of our East Brunswick Social Studies Department. The primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an interdependent world. We want our students to be educated and inspired for lifelong inquiry and informed civic action. Providing leadership, resources, and support to all teachers in this department are these two men. Dr. Dan Moran and Mr. Tom Husar make such a dynamic team because they share a common vision for their department, a bit of which they will share with you this evening.
Okay, that's a tall order. Okay, so thanks. We're really excited to be here to give you a little overview of what we do in the district from K to 12 for social studies.
Okay, so recently at back to school night, I walked into a classroom and I saw this very simple slide that was projected on the teacher's screen. And it's just simply skills is greater than dates. And when I saw it, I said, this is it. Like, this is so emblematic of what we are about now in social studies. And social studies isn't about strictly memorizing dates and, you know, what flank, which general went during a particular war, but it's really about those transferable skills. Skills that make students stronger, not just in their social studies classes, but stronger in their science classes and English classes, and so on and so forth. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight.
And that's what we've been talking about pretty much since the day we started talking about social studies, right? So we want to give you an overview of some of the skills that we try to foster in all the kids in our district. The first thing is that, you know, historians read. We always say if you can't say you like history, but you don't like to read. Then you might like the History Channel. But, you know, if you like history, which is fun, but if you like history, then you like to read. And that's what historians do, is they read a ton. So as we've talked, we're like, you know, we got to get the kids to read more. And so that's a screenshot of just some of the dozens and dozens of books that our kids read in history classes. Gone are the days where you read chapter 35, do the questions, and come back. The kids read a lot of quality nonfiction. They read entire books. They read historical fiction. And this is something that goes on from the time they're little until they graduate. Also, when they read, we get the kids to talk about their reading in really, really sophisticated and meaningful ways. On the left there, you can see that big picture is some 8th grade students talking about the historical novel Day of Tears, which is about a slave auction, and they're having what we call a fishbowl. And on the right, there's other kids from Churchill and the high school discussing their books. So when they read, they have really deep conversations about what they're reading, and they connect it to the historical content. But along with reading comes writing, right? Because you know, you can't have one without the other. So we encourage the students to write real essays and do real historical research, again, from the time they're little to the time they're older. Two things we found very useful is that our students use Turnitin, just like they do in English classes. That starts in Hammarskjöld. You probably know it as everyone knows Turnitin as kind of like a plagiarism detective, you know, service, but it's really much more than that. It's a way for teachers to comment online on student papers. And a lot of our kids submit essays and their writing assignments electronically. They get feedback right away. It's really detailed with little bubbles that pop up. So that's been really useful. And you probably also know about Newsella, which is a great service that we've purchased for our students, where from the time they're you know, in primary grades, they can read about current events, but the readings are all leveled. So that if we're all reading about, say, you know, the First World War and the 100th anniversary of it, and my reading level is different than yours and yours, we could all be reading the same content at the same time, but it's leveled for us to keep it challenging, so that no longer do kids have to say, well, I didn't get to read that. Or we found that that's really, really useful. And a couple years ago, as you know, we merged ILA and social studies in grades 4 and 5. And that's worked out really, really well because they practice those skills, you know, almost for like half the day. And we found those units integrate really well. It goes along with the writing they do. So that's been a really, really great move.
So reading and writing are both, you know, super important skills, but so is public speaking. So we want to give our students K to 12 every opportunity that we can to read, write, research, and then celebrate what they've learned. So here in this image, you can see this young lady with a nice bright smile. That's my little daughter. That's Caitlin Husar. So that's her at Memorial Elementary School presenting her favorite subject, of course, social studies. But what was great was getting to this event and walking around and seeing these students who were so excited to present, whether it was their favorite subject as it was for my daughter, or to present somebody who's a hero in their life. So it's not something that, you know, we work on beginning at the high school level. It's something that we're working on from a K to 12 perspective.
Here you've seen shots from the famous Folks Festival and History Con, which many of you have attended. Every year, get ready for your invite. It'll be in March again. But this is something that came from the ground up from teachers at Hammersholt that we kind of developed. That started actually because one day we were all talking about what we like to read. And myself and another teacher started talking about what biographies we read, and that became this great famous Folks Festival, where the kids do a lot of research that brings them up to that point where they're in the Hammersholt cafeteria. And as you know, if you've been there, we encourage the kids to be able to speak to adults that they've never met before about what they've researched, and not just like, recite a bunch of facts or read slides. And we found that every year the kids get better because we get better at teaching them those skills. Here's another shot. On the left is a young man learning about Les Paul, the inventor of the electric guitar, in what we call a classroom museum. We do these a lot. And on the right there, that's from the Innovation Night, the Innovation Expo, where we had students talking about this at the Innovation Expos. That was another way for them to show off their public speaking skills. And we another thing at Hammersholt that's a lot of fun. Last year was the first time we did, this goes with our celebration theme, the National History Bee, where students compete in this kind of like, it's kind of like a Jeopardy kind of thing. Where they compete against each other, and then they can go regional, they can go statewide and national, and that's going to be done for the second time in our district. It's going to happen this January, so we're excited about that.
So beyond the skills, one of the other things that we love to do in social studies is bring in folks sometimes locally, and also people, as you're going to see, kind of virtually throughout the country, to kind of work with our students and help them kind of refine their skills and get them excited about it as well. So here you can see locally, freeholder Ronald Rios coming in to talk with our students, our 8th grade students, about civic awareness as part of their civics unit that we do in the 8th grade. Our 9th grade students had Robert Zorn, who is one of the writers of one of the 3 books that they read in 9th grade about the kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh's son. So Robert Zorn, who's local, he lives in Madison, comes in every year and meets with our students. He couldn't make it in the fall, and he was very disappointed that he couldn't make it. So just a couple weeks ago, he phoned in, and he was having conversations through the speakerphone with kids. It was really, really cool. Sometimes, like best-selling author Candace Millard, who lives down south, it's a little difficult to get her into the classroom. We couldn't get her to do a Skype session, so we had students, through their teacher's Twitter account, tweet questions off to Candace Millard, and they had kind of this Twitter session in the classroom, which was really, really powerful. We had another author, this gentleman, David White, who is a writer for the History Channel, and he took questions via video from our students and responded to them. And this was a great way, again, for our students to interact with professionals in their fields. Okay. Also, at the high school, we do a Veterans Day ceremony each year, where we like to bring in members from the Army, Air Force, Marines, and Navy to not only participate in a flag-raising ceremony, but then to go into classrooms afterward, to meet with our students, to talk to them about their experiences. And the takeaway from our kids is always, at the end, wow, they were only like 2 years older than I was when they decided to enlist. It's a really, really powerful experience for our students. And then we had, last year, we were very lucky to have a Holocaust survivor from Monroe, a gentleman in his 90s named Alex Triber. And he came in and met with our 9th grade students as part of their World War II unit. And it was the most powerful experience I've had since I became a department chairperson here. I will never forget when Mr. Triber stood up during his presentation. He rolled up his sleeve and he showed students where his tattooed number was on his forearm from when he was sent into a concentration camp. It was so powerful, and we had so many students who came up to myself and the teachers who organized the event just thanking us, and then of course thanking Mr. Triber for bringing him in to speak with them that day. Unfortunately, Mr. Triber passed away just in August at the age of, I believe, 93. But the experience that our students had with him last year was just tremendous, tremendous.
We also want our students to go out and visit historic sites, right? So sometimes you have to get out of the room. So everyone knows the kids love to go to the farm, where we learn about all kinds of communities, right? They also love to go to the municipal center. Of course, they all want to see the jail. That's the big draw of that. Like, well, we get to see the jail, right? We say, no, the town's about more than the jail. So those are 2 field trips we do with little kids, right? With the older kids, though, we've brought them to the New York Stock Exchange on the left, to the 9/11 Memorial. Right? That's a trip that's been run a couple years at the high school. And another thing we've started now is that we have students do virtual field trips. There are certain national historic sites where you can put your students in a room, and the rangers that work there will project through the computer into the classroom and talk to your students And on the left, we have Ford's Theater, and on the right, we have Thomas Edison's lab. And we've been lucky enough to have our students, quote unquote, visit these sites in the classroom, but also speak live with the people that work there and give them virtual tours of the places, so they didn't have to obviously go on the road. So that's been really, really interesting.
I remember when Caitlin came home, because that was part of the third grade trip, and she was very disappointed to report to me that they couldn't see the holding cell, and then she starts whispering, because somebody was in it, Daddy. So historians collaborate. That's a big piece, again, of what we do. So some examples in terms of how we collaborate. We work with the East Brunswick Police Department. This is part of our Police and Teens program, where they work with our criminal justice teachers to come out and talk about what it's like to be a local police officer. Our IPA 1 honor students on the right going to Hammersholt to work with students on civic awareness as part of a unit on the Bill of Rights that we do at the high school. And then finally, the capstone experience in the social studies program. This is a shot of our AP IPL students down in Washington, D.C. in a congressional hearing room. That course, really more than any other perhaps, really combines all the skills that we talked about tonight and is always a tremendous, tremendous experience for our students.
So that's kind of an overview of what we do. We don't want the kids to just learn about history, we want them to do history. And when we started thinking about it, we said, well, what do historians do? And those are the very skills we try to foster every day in our rooms. So, thanks.
Question, what's going on in the elementary schools?
What's going on in elementary schools?
In social studies?
In what, I mean...
What do we, this is giving us Churchill and the high school.
No, he did elementary.
Yeah. I got the ILA thing, but are we taking them on similar trips? What are we teaching them? We saw the books that we're reading there. What are they covering? Tell us about that for a little bit.
Well, we do historical fiction in elementary, right? And the biggest thing was when we merged ILA and social studies. That was a big, big way, because, so to speak, because in that case we got to foster a lot of the same skills. So we still have the existing curriculum, right? But they do open-ended responses. They do the same kind of things they do in ILA. We merged some of their ILA units, actually, where they have to learn persuasive writing. Some of those have been tied into current events that they do on Newsella.
Okay.
Newsella was a big part of us.
Okay, so now we're bound by, of course, the content standards that the state tells us we have to do, et cetera, and we have our own.
Yeah.
Walk us through the sort of the transition, as you're starting in kindergarten up to 12. The kinds of things that we expect our youngsters to know, primary going up 3 to 6, and how things are changing when you get up, sort of get up through the grades.
Well, they're not actually, we follow all the New Jersey content,
Right.
And we do that, and also the New Jersey student learning standards, the skill-based ones, right? But a lot of the content, a lot of the skills are the same. So public speaking is something that starts in kindergarten. We actually have our kindergarten meeting next week. We're going to talk about that for kindergarten, first grade. So when we made this presentation, we tried to go through the things that were K to 12. And so doing research, that's something that the kids do as early as 3rd grade. Public speaking is a big thing they do in 4th and 5th grade. The Genius Hour project, which is just went on at 2 of the schools, is going on now. That involves a lot of public speaking. So a lot of those skills we practice them as they get older. So they get more sophisticated, right? So there's the famous Folks Festival in 6th grade, builds upon the skills they learned, say, in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then, some of those kids end up, debating in Washington.
Okay, that's good to know, because I want to make sure that we understand what they're doing also,
Yeah.
because this was a lot of secondary stuff. Mrs. Becker.
Great presentation, guys. There we go. So I'm an unabashed history groupie, and I know that we've talked several times over the years in curriculum about how history curriculum is almost a living document, because history is made every single day. So if you think about the things that some of us have lived through in our lifetime, the fall of the Berlin Wall, Watergate, the Vietnam War, things like that. When these things happen, when history literally is made on a daily basis, how do we have the flexibility, and you've described it much better than I possibly could, the flexibility built into our curriculum to be able to immediately jump on something and bring it, make it a part of the curriculum, because it's literally happening today or yesterday.
Yeah, so over the years, one of the things that we've heard from students over and over again was that they wanted their social studies experience to be as relevant as possible. That it's important that we learn historical facts and we learn about historical events, but what's the relevance to me today? Like that type of mentality among our students. And so that's what we try to do. We try to foster an environment amongst our teachers that we encourage them to talk about what's going on currently. One of the things, Ms. Becker, that we used to have in the old days with our exams, we're so tied to those exams that have like 120, multiple choice questions that were like, which of the following, generals, or which of the following, secretaries of state, like that type of thing. So we moved completely away from that to more of a skills-based test, and that has freed up our teachers to go into much more depth on
That's
certain
great.
topics in American history and in world history, and tie it to what's going on today.
wonderful.
One concrete example I can give you, in our US 2 courses, we have the whole fourth quarter is dedicated to post 9/11 America. Whereas where I was teaching, and I came out, like 6 years ago to become the department chair, it was, by the middle of May, you were racing to get through Bill Clinton because you knew you had that final exam coming up and you had to teach to certain
Right.
questions. So it really has become a much more relevant experience for us.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I can tell you quickly with the little kids, one of the things that helped is New Zealand's been really, really instrumental because the content standards, if you wanted to, we would never do this as a district, but you can get those done really, really quickly in terms of a full school year, right? But it's the New Jersey student learning standards that require a lot of practice because those are skill-based. So like any skill, you got to repeat it, right? So when teachers use Newsela, like I've been in a fourth grade class where fourth grade is the history of New Jersey, and I had a teacher reading a current event about natural resources on Newsela, and then she connected, well, what neat resources did you see in New Jersey? And how did those come up there? So, and that was like really current, and the kids were all doing leveled reading, and it was really neat because if you walked in for a minute, you're like, wait a minute, is this science? Is this social studies? Like, what's going on here? And it was really, really interdisciplinary. And so we find that Newsela's helped the little kids bring current events into the room a lot.
Thank you.
Would you say that it has kind of forced us to be teaching more thematically?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because you can't, one of the jokes we have, the AP World course just started this year. And one of the first things Tom and I told the teachers that started the course, we said, the first thing is that you can't do it. Like, it can't be done
Yeah, you
content-wise.
can't.
You can't do
Right.
the history of the world in 180 days, or 180,000 days, you can't do it. So you have to think about what your themes are going to be, and then what skills you're going to foster through those themes. So a theme might be exploration, and then what skills do you foster in that, or governance or something like that, right?
We were actually able to cover all that stuff back in the 70s when I started. Okay? I mean, I don't know, you guys just aren't,
It's amazing how much you can cover when you have an overhead projector. It's just going line by line by line.
Hey.
It was
I
very
like those
useful.
overheads.
I had
That's how I learned
multicolored
it, too.
pens. It's
No,
good.
but to that point, if it's an AP class, AP World History, is there an AP test for that?
Yes.
Okay, so how is one prepared for that? Or is the tests more skills-based, more
They're all
theme-based?
skill-based.
Okay.
Much more skills, yes.
You have to know your content. You can't go into it
Right,
blind.
well, so we have to kind of manage getting enough content in there that covers what you need to know.
Right.
Great job.
And Mrs. Shaw, that's
Thank
pretty
you.
funny. Anyone else?
Well, I was a social studies teacher
Well,
and department head, I'm just saying.
And had colored pens.
And,
right, she had a red pen, too,
I
right?
had a red pen and a purple one.
Thank
my
you very much.
favorites.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much. Thanks.